You are listening to the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast, Episode 8. In this episode of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast, we're talking hunting buddies. What makes a good one? What makes a bad one? And we're also going to be joined by Barton Ramsey, owner of Southern Oak Kennels, to talk a little bit about gun dogging. All right, welcome to the show. This is episode 8, the Ocho of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast. We got a great show lined up for you this week. We're going to be joined by Barton Ramsey of Southern Oak Kennels, talk a little bit about gun dogging and some of the tips and techniques to help your retriever. And if you're just getting started, he's going to offer us some insight on how to pick, a good dog that's going to match up well with you. We're also going to talk a little bit about hunting buddies. What makes a good one, what makes a bad one. So we'll kind of weigh in on where we stand there. And speaking of hunting buddies, as always, I'm joined with by one of my hunting buddies, Dan Harushka. Dan, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Our duck season came in and it's going pretty well. We have a few birds in the area, and tis the season. It doesn't get any better.
Yeah, it's starting to get cold. We've had down here in Virginia, we had our 4-day early season come in, and I took off some work and made sure I got out there all 4 days. There's a good amount of birds in the area here, a lot of resident birds, so the hunting was tough. Managed to scratch out a few, but it just sort of whet the appetite a little bit. Our season's out now until mid-November, so we're really hoping for a good push of cool air and maybe get some diver ducks down here, and that's going to be my new obsession and pursuit for this year is to get out on the Potomac River here and chase some of those diver ducks that I hear so much about. So going to do some of that and knock down some honkers once it comes back in. But in the meantime, get my long line set up and get everything rigged up for mid-November. So definitely looking forward to that. But it was nice to get back out for a couple of days and chase them down a little bit.
And don't be shy to come back up here too. I think we're until mid-December, ducks and geese. So we got a long season ahead of us. And I just wanted to bring up our last podcast. We were talking to Casey about duck setups. And one thing that I did on opening day was set up a multi-bird rig. And I definitely didn't use my call as much. I used a lot more motion. And, I think it paid off. We had a lot more birds just coming right into our decoys, and they just seemed to like it a lot more than a call. So, the tips from him definitely paid off, and I hope that some other people out there used them as well.
Yeah, I've noticed, how just important motion can be. When I was hunting these last couple of days, there was some lines around me that I could see their mojo decoys working, and birds that would circle the area or, would be coming towards my spread. That blind would hit a hail call or something at those birds, and they would turn, and it was almost like they just immediately locked in on that mojo, and they were going towards them. They didn't always just dump in there with their feet down and that kind of thing, but they were definitely getting more action because they had the mojo and had a little bit of motion going that I didn't have. We had very, very little wind all 4 days, so we had some rain, we had some cloud cover, we had a lot of things that we thought would work in our benefit, but there was just not a lot of wind, and without the motion that you really need, it's just tough. We had jerk strings and stuff, but one of my mid-season purchases will be a motion decoy or two for this November split that we got coming up. So, I'm going to be in that game in the very, very near future. So looking forward to that opportunity as well. But, it's unfortunate that you guys up there aren't able to use battery-powered, motion decoys. So that really kind of limits your opportunities as far as what you can put out there for motion.
Yeah, I think we're starting to get it figured out a little more. But I also want to give a shout out to my brother. He went out with a couple guys. They got their 18 bird, the 3-man limit, and they ended up with 7 bands. So congrats to my brother. He got two banded mallards and 2 banded teal. And we put that picture up on our Facebook page with him with 6 bands. That was him and his friend Nate. And man, that's just a hunt that they will not forget in a near future. So congrats to them. They had an awesome hunt, and I wish I was sitting with them opening day, because it just seemed like they had action all morning, and even when they were picking up, there were still birds flying. So kudos on good work to them there.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of where you hunt, that's obviously one that's going to stick in the memory bank for a long time. But, to be up in that area and, the opener where it's primarily resident birds, and, just to get in a situation like that. But if I recall, you said he knocked down a couple teal that were banded as well.
Yep. Yeah, I think they had 3. Well, Joe and Nate had 3 teal and 3 mallards out of their 12. So, I mean, 6 of 12 were banded. I mean, that's awesome.
Did they get the band information back? Did they say, were they locally banded or were they migratory?
I haven't talked to them, but I will be asking that.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. I'd be interested to see, if we were getting a push or if those were just some local birds. They kind of grouped up and that kind of thing. But anyway, yeah, outstanding hunt. You can check a picture of that out on our Facebook page. It's really cool just to see that many, bands on a group of ducks from one hunt. So, you mentioned, your brother Joe and his buddy Nate, and they were out there opening morning. And, as I mentioned, kind of in the roll-in, you and I have spent a lot of time in the blind together and, chasing waterfowl and stuff. And we thought it would be kind of a good conversation to have to talk about hunting buddies in general and sort of what makes a good one, what makes not so much of a good one. And, just sort of offer our thoughts and sort of weigh in on that. But I want to caveat this section is that, just because, you may exhibit one of these things that we talk about, either good or bad, that doesn't necessarily make you a good or bad hunting buddy. That's not really what the point of it is. The point of it is just to sort of be mindful when you're hunting with your buddies, as far as the way you're conducting yourself and the way that things are going. Make sure that you're, being considerate of other people and, pitching in where you should be and that kind of stuff. So that's really sort of the premise of this conversation. It's not to say, if somebody does this, that you should try to cut them out of your hunting circle or you shouldn't hunt with that person anymore, that kind of thing. It's just more of a general conversation to, give everybody an opportunity to sort of look in the mirror and say, hey, is that something I do? Or, can I do better at that? And, I'll be the first to admit that there's things on this list in the bad section for sure that I know that I've been guilty of in the past and I will probably be guilty of in the future. There's just some of those things that, that are difficult to avoid, but as long as you have an awareness, I think that's the most important thing. So, I think it's a good conversation for us to have, and is one that will make everybody kind of think a little bit about themselves and their hunting group. What do you think, Dan? Yeah,
we put this. We set up our segments, and you mentioned this one, and at first I was kind of shaking my head. I'm like, what are we going to talk about? And then, over the last week or so, I've been thinking about it, and like, man, it's a really good conversation to have, and I guess I'll just start it out. And, besides being dependable, I think, my hunting buddies a lot are friends, and something that I look for in friends. And even you and I, when we started HP Outdoors, we said, no matter what we do, we can always be totally just brutally honest with each other. And I think honesty goes such a long way, no matter what it is, setting up and just getting out in the field, but just being honest with one another and with what's going on. I think, that's just a huge aspect to being a good hunting buddy. And, if you have guys lying to you, no matter what it's about, that's definitely going to just deter you from going out in the woods with them.
Yeah, I think that, I had written down along the same line. It's just sort of, a good hunting buddy typically matches up with you personality wise. You guys are probably into a lot of the same things other than duck hunting. Obviously, you got a lot of the same personality characteristics, that sort of stuff. It makes it easier if, we both, your hunting buddy's personalities and temperament, and that you can say, look, man, I'm going to be honest with you here. Like, you shouldn't have taken that shot, or, You might have rushed the call a little bit, and you know that they're not going to get offended because you're not trying to be a jerk to them. You're trying to be honest, because ultimately the goal is to have a good time and for everyone to be successful. So, like for us, when we have a situation where, whether we're talking about a podcast segment or something with our website, for example, or what have you, if either one of us disagree with what we're doing, we've got the green light. We can both say to each other, I don't like that, and here's why. And, we're not going to get offended because we both know that we want the end goal is the same. We want to be successful and we want to have something that looks good. So the same thing applies when you're hunting blind and you're talking with your buddies, and maybe you're talking about decoy setups, and they want to do it one way, you want to do it the other way. You got to be honest with each other as to why you want to do that, because inevitably, if you sit there on your hands and say, no, we'll go your way, we'll set the decoys the way you want to, and the birds come in and they don't work properly, you're going to get upset because you're going to say, well, if we had set them up the way I wanted to, they would have worked properly. And that's just going to start animosity and, it just kind of puts a damper on the day. So it's better to just kind of put it out there and hash it out. And, ultimately everything's not going to work out the way it's supposed to be. But if you hold that kind of stuff in, it's going to create, tension between you and your buddies. And that's not what you're out there to do. So I think what you're onto there is a really good point.
Yeah. And I think, just working off what you just said, having the ability, or if you want to call it patience, to be able to learn from your hunting buddies. Like if they've experienced something that maybe you weren't with them on a hunt and something that worked, being open to that and not just straight shutting ideas down, I think is a huge advantage to being a good hunting buddy. So, and I'll just move into my next one. Dependability, I think, is right behind those. You have to be able to depend on someone, and that goes back to friendship too. Like if you're having a hard time in life, you need to be able to lean on someone. And it's the same thing with, waking up early and being to a spot on time, and just being there for one another. So dependability is another one high on my list.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. There's nothing more frustrating than to have a buddy that you're counting on for a hunt the next day, and he decides to hit the bar the night before and can't get out of bed in the morning. If you want to go to the bar, that's fine. It's no big deal. But just know that we're counting on you the next morning to get up and get in the truck and come meet us. So definitely agree with you there. Showing up, being accountable, all of that stuff is super important. And, I'm not going to argue with anything that you've said so far, and I'm going to roll right into the next thing. And you sort of touched on this, but for me, being a solid outdoor being a good hunting buddy involves being a solid outdoorsman. And that doesn't mean that you have to know everything, but for me, that has to mean you have to be willing to follow the laws, follow your regulations, like you said, be open. Like if someone makes a suggestion, take that into consideration. Realize that there's not one person that knows everything there is to know about hunting and spending time in the outdoors. But, I want somebody to hunt with me that truly appreciates being outside and being in, the field and spending time, not just, shooting ducks and hammering ducks. I want someone that appreciates, the outdoor lifestyle and we'll be okay if we don't have a great bang up hunt that day because we got to spend time outside and doing something we love. So for me, just being an all around in general solid outdoorsman is really important.
Yeah. And I'll go into another one and quote a movie, and jealousy is a stinky cologne. And I'm just going to roll with that. I have a couple buddies that want me to succeed more than what I want to succeed sometimes. And when I mean that, like if it's deer hunting, if I knock a buck down or something, some of my friends will drive, an hour and a half just to come and track it with me. They said, don't go in the woods until I get there. So, the excitement to see your friends succeed is, you can't replace it. Like that's just an awesome friendship, an awesome hunting buddy, even if they can't make it. We have a couple guys that come on hunts just to film, and they want to see you succeed. And that's, the jealousy part. There's some guys I know that, they won't tell you about spots or never invite you, or, that goes back to a lot more whitetail than waterfowl hunting, but that it's their buck, and, they don't want you to have a part of it. But, having friends that have your back and support you and, are most of the time they're happier than you are whenever you succeed. Like I said, you can't replace friends like that.
Yeah. I mean, I literally don't have anything to add to what you just said. I think that nailed it straight on. And, I couldn't agree with you more. For me, another thing that I'm just going to tab on to what I just said about being an outdoorsman, and it's sort of a two-part, along the same vein, respecting the land and being safe. I mean, I've mentioned it on the show a couple different times. I will not hunt with you in the field if you're not safe. If you're not putting your gun on safety, if you're flagging people with the muzzle of your weapon because you're not paying attention, like I will not hunt with you, and I don't mind telling you that I won't do it, and that's why. It's something that's just it's too important. It's not worth somebody getting hurt, and if you're just that careless, I'm not going to put the time into being out in the field with you. So, being safe is incredibly important to me, and being respectful of the land. I don't want to see people out there littering and just throwing stuff around. And a lot of times you're on private property that someone's granted you permission to be on. You need to leave it better than you found it. Treat it like it'd be your own. All of that kind of stuff. So for me, those are two things that I look for in a good hunting buddy.
Yep, and I'll just touch on it. I mean, there's nothing better, your buddies. Some of my friends bring a bucket with us, and I'm just talking about the crow hunt that we went on last time. I don't know how many times we shot, but we shot a lot more than what we killed, and we had a bucket full of shells just cleaning up. So, there's make sure you clean up. We've talked about that before. Leave it better than you found it, and yeah.
Okay. And another thing, I'm just going to kind of group a couple here together. A good hunting buddy is aware of, how much gear costs, how much gas costs, all of that kind of stuff. And they're willing to pitch in, you're not going to be, they're going to offer to drive once in a while. If you're driving a bunch for whatever reason, they're going to offer to give you some gas money. You may or may not accept that money, but that's up to you. You know what I mean? But they're at least willing to offer that help. And then, just helping clean up, tear down. And there's nothing worse than a guy that comes out in the field and all of a sudden, he's the one that has to leave an hour early before the hunt's over because he's got something going on every single time out, and he doesn't have to clean up, tear down decoys, all that kind of stuff. So, just doing your part in general, whether it be, with gear, gas, setup, all that kind of stuff, just doing that, is an important thing for me when I'm trying to decide who I'm going to hunt with.
Yep. Do your half. Do more than your half.
And for me, the final thing is, this isn't an absolute must, but it's something that should be, in my case, considered. Someone with a similar family situation. It's easier for me to hunt with guys that have kids like I do, and that kind of thing, because they understand the time commitments that need to take place, and they're more understanding if you can't make it out on a day because you got to take your kid to a birthday party or something like that. I mean, all of that stuff plays into account, and they're going to be in a similar situation as well. So it can get tense if there's folks in your hunting group that are more free with their time and they want to push it more often, and that you're unable to do that. They may get frustrated with you. So, setting the proper expectation is probably more important than their actual family situation. But, it obviously helps when they can kind of put themselves in your position and understand what you're going through. So,
yep. And that goes, I was just going to say, that goes back to the being honesty part, and just tell them, I can make it out, but, I got to shut it down at 8:30, or, be open about it, and you won't have those conflicts when you're out in the field.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about some of the bad things. The easy answer to say would be, if you don't do the stuff that we said that were good, then that makes you a bad hunting partner. But, for me, it's a little more than that. For me, the biggest thing is just an overall selfishness. And we've talked about this, sort of already, but if you're not willing to help out and see the other guys that you're with succeed, and you're just all about yourself, and, you want to sit in the best shooting hole every time, and, you want to call the shot or whatever the case might be, that wears it, not just me, but that wears the whole group down. So a general selfishness is typically a pretty bad thing when you're talking about hunting with groups of guys.
Yeah. You don't want to be out with people that are negative. Like there's nothing worse than that, like you said, and you can bring the whole group down. You can bring the whole hunt down. Like, this is something, hunting should be fun. You should go out and just have a blast, and, don't be a Debbie Downer.
Another thing for me is a general respect for other people's gear. If you've got a bunch of decoys that you're bringing to the field, you'd hope that your guys wouldn't be throwing them around, banging them around. They would take care of them a little bit. For me, that's something that I think just shows an awareness that, hey, this is yours. I respect that. I'm going to treat it like I would treat my own or better, just because, like it's not mine. So, that's something that I notice. If someone's taking care of my gear, I certainly appreciate it, and I try to take care of theirs as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, we'll just go back. I think the dependability thing, just, if you say you're going to be somewhere, make sure you're there and don't have a whole group waiting on you. And, just be a friend, be the best hunting buddy that you can be. And, I think we touched on quite a bit here, but that, just be a good guy, be someone that other people want to be around.
Yep, definitely. Now, there's 3 more points real quick that I just want to point on that everyone's experienced at some point or the other, and I think that it would frustrate every single person listening to this show, so I think it bears worth saying. One, the I shot every bird guy, that wears out really quickly. If you're the one that shoots every single bird every time they come in, or every single banded bird's the one that you shot, things of that nature. I've seen countless arguments in the field over stuff like that, and it wears everybody thin. So, of course, if it's in your lane and you feel you made the shot, that's fair enough. But over a while, it seems like, sometimes guys will be like, I've shot every time a bird, I smoked that bird or I did that, and then you wonder to yourself, well, have I killed a bird yet today? Type of thing. So, be mindful of that. The know-it-all, I think that this one is one that I tend to fall into, because I like to talk hunting. I like to think I'm knowledgeable, and I like to talk about hunting. And I think sometimes that can come off as trying to be a know-it-all and, saying that my way is the best way. And, I try to be aware of that, and sometimes I just battle that. But I like to talk about different techniques and why I think this would be successful and this wouldn't be successful. And I try to just be mindful of other people's opinions and things of that nature. But, I fear that that's one that I probably fall into a little bit every now and again. So definitely try to keep mind of that in my own part. And the last one would be, this is probably the super cardinal rule. If your buddy takes you to a hunting spot that, he had discovered, or if it's an overlooked public spot that he took you to and all of that kind of thing, don't go back there the next day with your buddies and exclude your guy that took you there. You shouldn't be moving in on his spots like that. Or if he's got permission from a landowner that is pretty liberal with their access through that hunting buddy, don't go to the landowner and get your own permission and take your own buddies in there without the guy that got you kind of introduced to that. It's just it's just kind of a jerk move, and it's a good way to burn a bridge. So I think that's just something kind of common sense, but unfortunately you see it a lot, and I think it happens more than probably most guys would like to see.
Yeah, I think like you said it exactly. It's a cardinal rule. If someone invites you to a spot, don't go back there unless you go with that guy. And that's just, I think that's a rule of a waterfowler. You never do that, ever.
Quick way to burn a bridge. So, that's kind of our list. That's sort of what we thought makes a good and what makes a not so good hunting buddy. If, if you've got anything else that you think, is worth bearing out, or if you've got a buddy that does something that gets on your nerves and you want to let us know about it, you can give us a call on the HP Outdoors hotline, 724-609-FOWL, 724-609-3695. If we like your comment and think it's good, we'll share that on the air, or you can shoot us an email, info@hpoutdoors.com, hit us on Facebook, things like that. Share what you think makes a good hunting partner and what makes a not so good hunting partner, and we'll continue the conversation in that regard. So Dan, we're going to go ahead and we're going to be lined up here to talk to Barton Ramsey. Barton owns Southern Oak Kennels, located in Mississippi, and we're excited to chat with him because he's going to share with us a little bit about gun dogs and sort of some training tips and techniques and sort of what to look for when you're picking out a dog. And we're just going to kind of cover the gamut with him. So I don't own a dog. I know obviously you own Kimber as a hunting lab. So I think this is a conversation that I'm sure you're probably looking forward to for sure.
Yeah, and I went into buying Kimber pretty blind. I had a good idea what I wanted, but as far as just the breeder and the lineage of the dogs, like I had no idea what I was looking at. So Barton has a really good thing going down there, and I'm excited to talk to him about it.
Yep. So let's go ahead and get into it. We're going to be joined by Barton Ramsey of Southern Oak Kennels. All right, we're excited to be joined on the show by Barton Ramsey. Barton is the owner of Southern Oak Kennels, located in Mississippi. Sir, how are you today?
Doing great.
So we're really excited to have you on the show. We've talked a lot on the show about gun dogs and retrievers, and Dan has mentioned his dog Kimber and how we've hunted with her a lot. So we're really excited to get your insight and sort of expertise in this area, and as well as for someone who's listening to this show that maybe has thought about getting a gun dog, or wondered what would go into the process, and maybe had some reservations just because it can be such an overwhelming thing. We're excited to have you shed some light on that opportunity and maybe clarify some doubts or concerns that some of the folks listening to the show might have. So let's go ahead and just start with, talk to us a little bit about what the average guy who's going out to look for a dog, what are they going to be looking for, for a quality breeder, and what kind of things should be a red flag that maybe that's not the best fit or not the best place to go, to select their dog?
Yeah. Well, thank you guys very much for having me on. And I think it's an important question to start with. When, one of the things I encourage people to do, if they can, I realize some people can't do this, but if they can, in that process, put price of the dog pretty far down the list, except that getting a quality retriever is going to, or at least could cost quite a bit because of the amount of work that goes into producing quality retrievers. And so, what I encourage people to look for first and foremost is health, looking for the right health guarantees. You want to find breeders who are not just saying health tested dogs, we'll get to that in a second, but they actually offer a guarantee, because you can have health tested dogs all you want, but unless the breeder offers an actual guarantee on Labrador health, or other breeds that you might be interested in for waterfowling, Boykin retrievers and any of those sort of things, then you can say, yeah, I bought a dog from health tested parents, but if your dog winds up failing hips or having eye problems or anything, you're sort of up a creek. And so health guarantee is very high up the list, number one for me. And I would include on that the hips in particular. Labradors and golden retrievers and Chessies are very prone to hip dysplasia. And so guarantee on hips up to, at least 24 months. That's the minimum you can send hips off to be x-rayed with the OFA and scored. We guarantee hips for 30 months just to give people a little buffer zone there. And then eyes, a lot of genetic eye disorders in Labradors. And so guarantee that there will be no genetic faults that come up in the eyes. And those usually come up pretty young, but we guarantee those for 30 months as well. And then beyond that, there are a couple genetic diseases that Labradors are prone to have. CNM and EIC and PRA are sort of the main ones that those are sort of the bad ones that people talk about. And so at least guarantee that the dog will be non-affected. Even if they're a carrier's fine, they'll never exhibit any symptoms, but that they would be non-affected by those. Those would be high up on the list for me. And so once you say, okay, well, I've got a big group of breeders here that offer really what I would expect is quality health guarantee and health assurances. Their Labradors that they're breeding are health tested. They guarantee their puppies. Moving beyond that, you really have to ask yourself a lot of questions about what is this lab going to do? What am I looking for? Are you looking to get into field trial games or hunt test games? Are you looking for a dog that's going to be a weekend warrior? Are you looking for the dog that's going to pound it, 65 plus days a year in the blind? Those are the sort of questions you need to ask, because there's so many different options with Labradors. And I'm speaking specifically to Labradors because that's what I do. So many different options that you can't just cookie cut it and say, hey, this is the best dog for everybody. You definitely want to check out the temperament of both parents, and I tell people, even if you hunt all over, 80 days a year, you still got almost 300 days, 280 days that you're not hunting. And so you've got to deal with this dog. And so buying a dog that maybe they're going to be nice in the blind, but they're just absolutely nuts around the house. So temperament's important to check out. Hunting ability, a lot of people advertise dogs as, hunting lines. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean that you just happen to know by word of mouth that the parents and the grandparents were hunted? And we can talk about this a little while later, but this is sort of where you get into the titles. Titles, a lot of people will call them, they'll say, well, I don't really care about buying, a dog that has titles in its pedigree because they're not going to participate in field trials or hunt tests. You say, well, it's not just about that. That is just a surefire way we have to say, hey, the parents, the grandparents, whichever ones achieve those titles, they were actually able to perform to a high level of standard in the field. And so even if you're not going to go that route, it's a way to just guarantee, hey, all the way back as far as this pedigree reads, these were, quality dogs as far as field work. So those would be sort of my top things: health clearances, and then temperament, and then hunting ability, measured in however you want to measure it. If you know the people that are breeding and you trust, or if you can just go see the dog, if they've got some nice video of the dog in the field, those sort of things would be good. But outside of that, really the type of titles you want to look for on a pedigree, those would be sort of the top three things I would say to check for when you're looking for a quality retriever.
Okay, and let me ask you this, because our listener is, primarily a waterfowl hunter, and let's use just me for an example. I don't own a dog that hunts. I own a golden retriever that's 90 pounds that lays around the house and gets ear infections all day, but that's another conversation for another day. But let's say I've located the breeder that I'm comfortable with, and I'm there to get a waterfowl dog that's going to hunt, primarily weekends and a handful of days throughout the season during the week. Not a 65-day grinder type of thing, but more of the weekend warrior type demand. What are a handful of things that I should be looking for? You mentioned temperament and that kind of thing, but take it a step further for me, and specifically, what are the things that I should be looking for? Because I'm sure as a breeder, you get folks in there doing all kinds of, witchcraft, and get the Ouija board out and ask what kind of puppy they should have or whatever, whatever they're doing. Shed a little light on the actual selection process and what people should be considering there.
Yeah, I think the selection process is, it leans heavily toward puppies when it really should lean heavily toward parents. And you wouldn't believe the stuff that people have done at our kennel when they're picking up a puppy. Of course, you got the tried and true, bring a paint roller and toss it out and see which dog retrieves it. Or get out a couple bird wings. I've had people show up with mallard wings and pheasant wings and want to see which dog will really fight for the wing. And I've had everything from that up to I had a guy that came and had a vet with him that just did a full physical eval on every pup, which was nice because then the vet was like, all your pups look good. And I was like, thanks for the free checkup. I appreciate it. And so just checking, which I understand, that sort of thing too. You want to make sure the pups are healthy and they've got a good bite. They don't have an underbite or an overbite. They've got palate. You want to make sure that their eyes look good and all that. But for the most part, if I'm not owning a kennel, or if I just were going to buy a new dog to add to my kennel stock and I were going to pick a puppy, when it comes to actually looking at that puppy and make a decision, there's very little that I'm going to care about. A lot of people will say, well, I want the biggest one. Well, the last 2 litters I sold, the puppy that was the smallest that people were like, I don't know, I want that one. That one kind of looks like the runt, is now the biggest dog. It was the most social dog in the litter, and so everyone else is eating their food. This dog is running around trying to grab their tails and play and just not eating. And once they got a new home and they're the only one not having to fight for food, and they get to sit there and eat it all they want, they grew up, so any of those sort of things, obviously I want to see the whole litter. Are they healthy? When it comes to personality, breeders can do a lot of good or a lot of harm in the way that they socialize their dogs. I want to see dogs that are bold. Not every dog's going to have the same personality. Not every dog is going to, run up to you and jump up and grab your pant leg and untie your shoes with their teeth and that sort of thing. But I want to see, I don't want to see dogs that run and hide. I want to see dogs that are bold and at least been socially interactive with people enough to where they have some confidence to explore new things, come up to new people, that sort of thing. Those are important. But I think for me, 90% of it is going to be looking at the parents. Hey, you know, can you take, I realize, hey, mama's been, you know, nursing these pups, and it's probably by the time you're picking up a dog, the pups have only been weaned for maybe 2-3 weeks. So she's not going to be in tip-top shape. And in actuality, she's probably going to be pretty beat up after nursing a litter for that long, and it kind of wears them down. But could you at least throw her a couple of retrieves? You know, I want to see how she looks in the field. You know, if he throws a retrieve and she just goes and picks it up and takes off, you know, that's a pretty bad sign. You know, if she gets a bird or a bumper and is gnawing on it and that sort of stuff, that's a bad sign. You know, obviously with the sire, if it's not a field-proven sire, but they own the sire, hey, I'd like to see him work. You know, I want to see those things. I want to interact with mom and dad, see sort of how they interact with people. Are they really shy? Are they super soft? Or are they bold? Are they confident? Or is it the dog a total nut job? You know, is the dog bouncing around off the walls everywhere? And so those are sort of the things I'm wanting to look for, mostly with the parents. And you can tell a lot about looks too. They have nice bone structure, their heads built, you know, properly, ears sit upright. They have all those sort of things. You know, looks are not first and foremost, but they are important. You know, no one wants to show up with their buddies duck hunting and have like the ugliest Labrador on the face of the earth. You know, you want a dog that looks nice. And so, evaluating those sort of things, you know, you can look at the puppy all day. At 7 weeks, it's going to, you know, definitely change. But looking at the parents can give you a pretty good idea of what it's going to grow up into.
I think that's a great tip that you were saying. You know, the mother just got done with, you know, feeding a full litter for, you know, quite a few weeks, and she might look run down. I know when I went and picked out Kimber, seeing her mother almost made me change from wanting a female to a male, just because she looked pretty rough, you know, and that's something to take into consideration. And I really never even thought of before. You know, they do, you know, they exert a ton of energy to make those puppies grow. So
it really wears them down. And the worst thing for breeders is that as soon as they get done nursing the pups, they actually look great. The wear and tear doesn't really show up until about 7 to 9 weeks, which is when, of course, everyone's coming to pick up your puppies. So you're like pouring the food to them. We give ours, you know, food. We give them eggs. We give them vitamins. We give them fish oil. We give the moms that just got done nursing, we give them everything we can to just get them back. And we usually get them back pretty quick into good running shape. But yeah, it's always when the people are coming to pick their pups that they look the worst. And you're like, look, here's some pictures of what she normally looks like when she hadn't just been, you know, providing food for 9 puppies for a solid 5 weeks, you know. So yeah, it's something to keep in mind.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of your tips, you're saying, you know, show up and make sure you're taking a look at the parents. So let me ask you, if you just can't get to the kennel to take a look at the parents and see them go through everything, talk to us a little bit, like you were saying, the lineage and the titles. Like what should people be looking for as far as, you know, if they complete, you know, if the parents completed their master hunter or something of that sort, you know, what can people kind of do the research on with the dogs to know they're going to get a quality hunting animal there?
Yeah, we get that a lot. I mean, I think for the average, you know, duck hunter who's just want a waterfowl dog, and they begin to first start to like peek at titles and pedigrees, you really need an interpreter, because you just start seeing all these letters and you think, what in the world does this even mean? And so I realize there are probably a lot of listeners that already know what all of that means, but just for sake of clarity, there are really 3 options in the U.S. and then one option in the U.K. In the U.S., you have AKC hunt tests, HRC hunt tests, and AKC field trials. Now, there are some other, some other options, but those are the 3 that most people recognize on titles. And so in the UKC, you've got started level dogs, and that's just if you got a dog that's got its started title, that's a dog that was able to go out, pick up a bird, bring it back. As simple as that. Did it on land, did it on water a number of times. Then you got seasoned level, which would be just an HR title, hunt retriever. And that dog was able to do double marks plus a blind with guns going off, honor another dog, you know, do the sort of things that you would really expect of a waterfowl dog. And then beyond that, you've got finished. And if a dog passes a number of those tests, you get the HRCH, Hunt Retriever Champion. And that dog really is able to run big triples, nice sized blinds through lots of elements, land and water. And then in the HRC, the dogs that have earned that, they're qualified to go, and they can go run what's called the Grand Hunt Retriever Championship. And if you pass that twice, it's just same as a finished test, just they add to the level of difficulty. And if you pass that twice, that's a Grand Hunt Retriever. You don't actually win any of the hunt tests. You either pass or fail. You're not competing against one another. You're competing against the standard. Similar with the AKC, except the entry level is junior, and then the mid level is senior, and the upper level is master. And then once you pass certain amounts of each level, you get a title, and so you become a master hunter. And then each year they do a big master national. And if you're a master hunter, you can qualify and you can go run the master national. And if you pass that test, it's an extra title. And then when you get into actual field trials, the dogs are competing against one another, and very difficult, long marks, big blinds, just because the level of competition has become so high. Field trials don't resemble hunting very much, not nearly as much as a hunt test actually resembles hunting. Trials are much more of a game. However, for a field trial dog, the things that are asked of it in a duck hunt are really, for them, pretty elementary, and so they can definitely produce some great hunting dogs as well. And so those hunters would be, those titles would be like FC, field champion, AFC, amateur field champion, NFC is a national field champion, or NAFC, a national amateur field champion. And then you have a title called the Jam, and that's a dog that didn't win, but it made it to the end of a trial and earned its Jam. And then you have Derby dogs, which is young dogs that just run big marks, and so it proves the dog has good marking skills. Any of those titles are very helpful as far as evaluating, hey, if the dog, especially when you get to the upper level, the HRCH or Master Hunter or FC, or if you're talking about British pedigrees, you've got FW or FPW, which is Field Trial Winner, and you've got FTCH, which is Field Trial Champion. When you get to those sort of pedigree levels, you know the dog is really able to perform in the field. What you can't tell from most American pedigrees is how's the dog at the house, how's the dog in the kennel, is he quiet in the blind, does he make a lot of noise, is he whiny, those sort of things. You can't tell that from titles, and so really all you can evaluate is the field work when it comes to American pedigrees. When it comes to British pedigrees, it's a little different because in their field trials, the dog has to be very quiet. The dog has to remain steady, sometimes for up to 3 or 4 hours without a leash on while they're on a shoot. The dog has to be very calm. If the dog's jumping around, acting crazy between shoots, that guy's eliminated. But then the dog also has to perform well, has to mark well, has to run blinds well, has to retrieve a shot game that's actually a real hunt. And so you get a little bit better of an evaluation there as far as all-around total package with the dog.
Yeah, and that's just a huge amount of information that you just gave out. So, anyone looking for...
Just unloaded it.
Yeah, exactly. So anyone looking to get a dog, if you want them, it does show in the blood, and that's why, breeders go with different dogs and, breed that into the bloodline. And, like you said, people look at the puppies and try and get them to do certain things, but, that comes with time. But so the amount that you put on the parents is just huge, the titles. And if they can do that, then you probably have a dog that is going to be able to live up to that. So that's pretty important. And like I said, that's just a ton of information there. So let me just go right back to where you started, and let's talk about what all goes into a breeding program. Like, what are the main points of breeding dogs?
Yeah, that's an important question. I think some people think of a breeding program as finding the best, most popular, most titled dogs and just sticking them together. It's really much more than that. I can only speak from my own personal experience, but for us, we were looking for, asking the question, all right, the guy who's going to hunt anywhere from 15 to 30 days a year. He really cares about his retriever, but he's also looking for a dog that he can take to the park with his kids. He can take to the office 5 days a week, and he can have in his living room, or have inside at the hunt lodge, that sort of guy. What's the total package for him? What does that guy really want in a dog? And so once we felt like we had some pretty good answers to those questions, we started looking for dogs that just matched that description. And we found that I breed dogs that are imported from the UK. I definitely don't want to get into the UK dogs versus American dog battle. That horse has been beaten to death. But I think there are really great retrievers on both sides of the pond. I think there's some really awesome American dogs, some really awesome British dogs. In the end, they're all Labradors. But I started getting dogs from the UK because just by the nature of the titles, I was able to evaluate quite a bit about the dogs, because I can't just fly over to Scotland every time or London and look at the dogs. You have to trust a little bit about what you're hearing about them and then what the title will tell you. And European dogs in America really started to get a reputation of being a little bit boring, being a little bit slow, those sort of things. And so I just started saying, what can we do in our breeding program to still produce dogs that have the off switch, but also produce dogs that really have the on switch, dogs that really get on fire when you're in the duck blind, that make the retrieve that everybody looks around like, man, that was impressive. Where can I get a dog like that? And so there's just so much that goes into that. You want to find dogs that are healthy. For us, it's all about finding stud dogs that have produced healthy and successful offspring, and then that come from a lineage of dogs that have produced healthy and successful offspring. So we want to look back and say, all right, in this pedigree, how many of these dogs have produced some real go-getters, some real champion dogs? So you might have the dog in there that they produced a field trial champion, and that's the only one they ever produced. Or you might have a dog in there that produced, 20 field trial champions. Well, that's the kind of dog you want in your breeding program. A dog that's got a history of just producing successful dogs in the field. Of course, you want health to match up. You want to know your dogs are producing dogs that are going to, there's no guarantees in Labradors. You can still have hip dysplasia, even with a dog that, had parents with perfect hips. But you want to do your best to avoid that. You want to do your best to produce dogs that are as healthy as possible. And so it's all around temperament, all around, some people will try to mix match. So they'll say, hey, we got this female, she's a little bit slow, she's a little bit soft, so we're going to breed her to this super high-strung male, and we're going to produce puppies that are right in the middle. And breeding programs just don't work that way. What you'll actually produce is a few puppies in the middle, a lot of puppies that are slow like their mom, and a lot of puppies that are really high-strung like their dad. And so what you want to do is actually find those dogs that are the total package. Which dogs really have it all. And that's what you want to stick with. And so that's sort of what we've gone with our program. Hey, every dog here at Southern Oak Kennels that I'm looking at breeding, would I be comfortable if this were my last dog to take in the duck blind with me and my last dog to really own? Would I be content with that? And if the answer to that's no, then why have it as part of the breeding program? We don't breed those dogs.
You're talking about, the dogs that if they have a litter of 20 champions and whatnot, do you keep breeding rights, or do you give your clients the option of breeding rights to those puppies? And that's something that I was asked, and I was kind of caught off guard. I had to sign a couple papers saying that I wouldn't breed my dog, or else I had to get permission from the people, from the kennel. And I was just wondering if that's something that a lot of people do. Is that, just a common standard or what?
Yeah, there's a lot of different options. And there's actually a lot of good reasons on both sides of the coin for that. As far as, everyone wants dogs that are registered with the American Kennel Club, sort of a given quality dogs are going to be registered just so we can keep up with the breedings and know that, hey, this is actually this dog's pedigree. And then you have an option of giving someone full or limited registration. limited, meaning, hey, you can have the dog's fully registered, but the dog's parents cannot be, the dog's offspring cannot be registered by you unless the breeder signs off with the AKC saying, okay, we released the limit. Or you can sell them fully registered, meaning, hey, this is your dog, fully registered. If you can, breed it however you like, and if you breed it according to the AKC standards, you can register the puppies yourself. A lot of reasons for both. We give full registration, and the reason is we're confident that we're producing healthy dogs. We do ask our clients, hey, please don't breed your dogs if you haven't had. A lot of people are like, hey, I got this dog. I really love her. She's great. She's the best dog we've ever had. We're going to have puppies. And we try to sway people away from that and just say, look, please have her hips checked, have her eyes checked. Just make sure, before you start introducing her back into a gene pool of puppies. Beyond that, for us, it's really, hey, you bought the dog. I don't feel comfortable, honestly, as an American, I don't feel comfortable saying, hey, you bought the dog, but you can't have its reproductive rights. We're going to hold on to that part because, honestly, it's your property at that point. You bought it. But there are some good arguments as far as protecting the breed and those sort of things. I've just found that if people are going to be idiots about it and breed whatever, a piece of diversion is going to stop them. They're going to do whatever they want to do. And so we at least try to provide an option for them to register the puppies if they go that route.
Yeah, and I think that's good to know going into, buying a dog that, for some people, once they get a dog like that, yeah, you want another one just like it. So you might want to, try and have some puppies, but in the end, that might not be the best idea.
No, it's really not. And I have people that'll buy male dogs, for me, and they have best intentions. And they're saying, if you have to be a nice dog, then I consider letting you use him as a stud dog. And I'm always like, well, that's really kind of you, but, I have his dad who produced him. So if he turns out to be a nice dog, I'm going to keep using the dog that made the nice dog. People, I understand it. When you're proud of things, you automatically want other people to see it. That's just human nature. We want people to see what's great about what we have. I get that whole thing completely. I just think that's not an excuse to be irresponsible. But again, we don't limit any sort of registration. You can do that, and you can sign contracts, and you can do the whole deal. And a lot of kennels do that to protect their name. A lot of kennels are selling dogs that are already registered in their name, and they've built a solid reputation for themselves. And so what they don't want is to see their kennel's name on a litter of puppies that was really an irresponsible breeding. And I understand that completely. I think you got to weigh the alternatives as well, and just really figure out which way you want to go as a kennel. And then you got to figure out as a buyer, are you looking to breed dogs in the future? Are you looking to possibly breed dogs, or you just want a really good dog? You got to ask yourself those questions as well.
And I'm gonna piggyback that a little bit. I've heard of kennels that will ask for the puppy back to run trials. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, and I don't do any of that sort of thing, only because if you wanted to take my dogs and run them in the trials that they're commonly run in, you'd have to fly them over to England and Ireland, and that would be difficult. But yeah, I've heard of some crazy stuff. Like there's some people who will sell puppies, and then if you put certain amounts of titles on the puppies when they grow up, they'll actually give you money back. So it's like, hey, these puppies are $2,000, but if you put a master hunter title on the dog, we'll give you $500 back. And it's just an incentive to keep that kennel's offspring, looking good in the field, that sort of thing. And then there are some people who will say, and really I think this comes more from influence from the show ring, which we haven't talked about at all, but in Labrador Retrievers, there are people who breed show Labradors. Those titles on a pedigree would be like CH for confirmation champion. And so those dogs really totally different. They're still Labradors, but they're honestly so far separated from field. There are a couple crossovers that have achieved success in both, but it's really rare. And in the show field, a lot of people will sell puppies, and they'll reserve the right to show that dog in the show ring. And so the dog will grow up, they'll examine the dog, see how the dog looks, and if the dog has the right looks, they'll show it. And I think that sort of bled over into the field trial world a little bit. And so people will want to have puppies back, and or people will, I have a lot of people who buy puppies from me and then want to send them back to me to be trained. And so I'd imagine if I were the guy running field trials and the dog came back and he was really a top-notch dog, I'd probably make that phone call and say, hey, what can we work out to put this dog in some trials? Because it can only serve to help your kennel by putting titles on dogs that you produce. So I guess that would be beneficial for a kennel as well as the owner, because then you get a dog that's titled back, and it's pretty neat for you as well.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a good way just to keep track of the dogs too. If, like you were saying, if a dog produces 20 champions, you can always market that. So that's good.
So Barton, up until this point, we've been talking about, the breeds and things to look for in different kennels and all the trials and things that, that they can compete in. But what we haven't really got into yet is the training portion of it and what goes into, creating a champion dog that, compete at these levels that you've talked about. So, let's talk about, generally the training as far as the aspects that go into the program. Maybe talk about some of the areas that are often overlooked, but are critical. And then maybe, even expound on that a little bit further and talk a little bit about some of the common mistakes that you see people making, when they're going through different dog training, drills and techniques and programs.
Yeah, absolutely. I think training Labradors, there's so many options when it comes to training Labradors. And I think sometimes we can be actually a little bit, we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot when it comes to these titles, because a lot of the current training programs are really, they lean toward training a dog in order to achieve titles, and often overlook some of the important aspects of having a dog that's actually fun to hunt with. And so they want the dog to get out of the trailer, run a triple, run a big blind back in the trailer. And rarely does a duck hunt work like that. Rarely do you get out of the truck and shoot your six ducks in 20 minutes and then you're back in the truck. And so I do think training programs are important. And when I say that, some people may not know that's a systematic approach. It's not a, hey, what are we going to work on today? Well, we'll just do this because, randomly this is what popped in my head today. But a systematic approach is saying, hey, let's evaluate the dog from A to Z. Let's start with a puppy who doesn't know anything, and here are the steps we're going to take. And you have to ask yourself, as far as picking a program, what does the finished dog actually look like? A lot of people want a dog that they would use the term meat dog. Is the dog going to go out and pick up my ducks that are relatively simple to get? If he does that, I'm happy. Other people want this total finished retriever. You shoot we were in Kansas 2 years ago, and that was right at the end of the day. A big volley of geese came over. We needed 4 to finish out for the day. 3 of them fell just stone cold dead right around us, and one of them, last second shot, clipped his wing and sailed, 300, 350 yards over on the other side of a valley. And I've got a dog with me, and is this the dog you want that you can really line up and expect the dog to get that retrieve? And she did, super rewarding to see that. Not everyone wants that in a dog, but that's the dog that, hey, she ran, I directed her past 3 dead birds, 350 yards to get us, that's a finished dog that'll do, get any bird anywhere. And so for training, you want to, for us, obedience is 90% of it. If you've got a dog that can run out and pick up birds all day long, but is in no way obedient, that's worthless for us. It's no fun to hunt with. And so we spend a lot of time on obedience. When we train our dogs, we get up and the dogs go out, and the first thing we work on is simple reminders of obedience. Heel work, sit, stay, remote sit, place, every day. Even dogs that are running, 350, 400-yard blinds, they work obedience. They've got to honor other dogs. And then once we get through a little bit of obedience with the dogs, then we start working on field work, and we do drills. The things that are important is marking, steadiness, honoring other dogs, and then the ability to maneuver through factors. So you've got ditches, you've got ponds, the ability to get through water and back up onto land, the ability to go through thick, heavy cover, those sort of things. And then you've got moving on to, teaching blind retrieves, ability for a dog to take a cat. Can you line the dog up and send it, and it goes straight out in the direction you send it? You blow the whistle, the dog stops. Look at you to take direction. Does the dog learn how to work with the team, or you handle the dog in the field? Those are the training aspects that we really work on, which is the same for everybody. There's just multiple approaches to how you teach those. There's everything from totally a lot of punishment on the dog, very stern on dogs, and those sort of programs usually lean towards dogs that are very highly driven. And then you've got people who are on the opposite end of the spectrum, totally positive, treat training, clicker training, and those lean toward dogs that are usually pretty soft. And then, we find ourselves at Southern Oak Kennels kind of right in the middle of that. Overlooking stuff, when it comes to, when I've hunted with people who have dogs, that they train themselves, didn't really know what they were doing, or sent to a trainer that didn't really know what he was doing. A lot of times it's just simple stuff. You show up with a guy and his dog's been hunting for 2 years, or maybe it's never been in a boat. And so you go to put the dog in the boat and it has a total freak out because it's never been in a boat. I know several guys who train their dogs. The dogs are about a year old. They take the dog out for the first ever duck hunt. They shoot a duck, falls dead in the decoys. They're so excited they send their dog out. The dog goes and grabs the decoy and brings it back. And, never trained with decoys. So the dog can run 200-yard marks, but never seen a decoy in its life. And so now it's bringing back all your spread instead of the one thing you want it to bring back. Those are the things that are often overlooked, just practical things. Tree stands or marsh stands, or being able to fit in a box on the top of a pit. Wherever you hunt, I just tell people, ask yourselves, when I hunt, from the time I pull up to the time I leave, what am I going to expect this dog to do, and have I trained for all of that? If the dog's only trained to go get things that are shot and not trained to actually sit on a tree stand, and you're going out in the timber, you're going to have some problems. And so we try to get people to ask, when we ask people that come back in for our training program, what type of hunting do you do the most? What type of hunting do you do, period? What's the full gamut of what you do in a season? That way we try to, at least cover everything the dog's going to experience. Because if the dog experiences it for the first time in the field on a real hunt with that level of excitement, more often than not, it's going to be a colossal failure. The dog's not going to know what to do. It's going to get overly excited. Handler's going to be embarrassed. They're going to, want to show off their new dog to their friends. So it's just lots of frustration. So really, we try to cover everything in training. And for us, every moment with a dog is a training moment. So when we feed the dogs, they sit and they have to wait for just a few seconds before we put the food down. When we let them out of the kennels, they sit. They have to sit quietly and call their name. When we get them out of the truck, they have to sit calmly for a few minutes while we get the gear out. We even take dogs and sit them in the yard, and we'll go set up a full spread of decoys in the yard and make the dogs just sit there and be still. Because the last thing you want, I saw it happen last year. We're out in freezing water, guys putting out decoys, the dog's just romping around going crazy. The guy tripped over the dog, fell on his back, and just got soaked in freezing water. Had the dog been sitting still like it should have been doing, the guy never would have had that happen. And so really just everything you can think of, have you trained the dog for that, and then just taking advantage of every opportunity to make sure it's a training moment, a teachable moment for the dog.
It's interesting because, I'm thinking back to hunts that I've been on with Dan where we have had his dog Kimber with us in the field. And I can remember thinking back to just how it adds another element as far as our preparation when we're out in the field. So it's like, we're gathering decoys, we're gathering blinds, things of that nature, guns, all that. And then, Kimber in and of herself just adds another element that we, you have to be focused on and you have to pay attention to when you're in the field. And I find it really sort of ironic that people overlook, putting your dog in that situation so frequently because, obedience is key, but if your dog's not comfortable in a boat or comfortable on a marsh stand or something like that, they might be able to mark and retrieve in the yard all day long. But if they can't get comfortable just kind of being in the marsh and in the hunting environment, all that's not really going to get put into play too much because you're going to be, dealing with those challenges before you even get a shot to, harvest ducks. So I think that that's really interesting that people overlook that, as frequently as they do. And I wanted to circle back to something that you said, because you talked about, the methods of training and, either using strictly positive reinforcement and treat training or other types of reinforcement and that sort of thing. I've read a little bit about retriever training, and, I'm not real versed in it, but I know that shock collars are something that people, sometimes use as a corrective measure. And, I don't know if it's as controversial as maybe I seem to think it is, but it seems to be one of those things where some people say that it's an effective thing. Other people say that it's not. Where do you stand on shock collars, and do you incorporate them in your program?
Yeah, great question. Very controversial. Of course, it's one of those questions when you ask it in the small retriever world, people kind of roll their eyes like, "Oh, come on," But for most guys that are going to buy a dog, it's an extremely important question. Do I need to go get a collar? Is there going to come a point where I'm going to need a collar for this dog? I think they're a very valuable tool, and I'll circle back around to our kennel in particular, and I have to clean that up a bit for my clientele. But, I think they're a valuable tool, but I think they're often misused, and I think this is what most people, just the average Joe who's got a dog, they think of a collar as a way to teach a dog something. Typically, it's something really simple like a recall. Recall is like here or come. So the dog's out in the yard. Like, "Hey, Fido, here," and the dog just looks at you. Or, as in most cases with a young dog, takes off and runs the other way. And so you got the guy who's in the neighborhood, or I've actually had it happen to me with a young dog in the duck blind when I was first getting into this. I'm calling the dog, and the dog is just going ballistic, running the opposite way. And I remember thinking to myself, boy, if I had a shock collar, I could really let him know what I want, and so it becomes this way to teach a dog. Like, I'm going to teach the dog that when I, push this button and they feel that, they need to come. Well, dogs, they don't operate like humans. They don't reason like we do. They respond, and they respond to reinforcement and punishment. And so positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement, positive punishment, negative punishment, those are often misused. There's a whole other hour of conversation to get into the actual philosophy of that. But when it comes to shock collars, they're not a way to teach anything. They're only a way to reinforce what's already been taught. And so you teach a dog to come to you with a check cord. So the dog is walking around, you've got a check cord, the dog won't come, you pull the dog, you basically reel the dog in, and then you offer a reward or just praise, good dog. And the dog learns, hey, when he says whatever the word is, come here, or blows the whistle 3 times or 2 times, and I go to him, that's a good thing. He likes that. And dogs, they want to make him happy. And so then, once the dog knows that, then you put the collar on after you've conditioned the dog properly to what a collar actually means, which is a whole process that you need to go through when you start using the collar. You don't just slap it on and start, lighting them up. You condition them to respond properly. Well, then the dog already knows, hey, when I say here, he's supposed to come to me, and because he's distracted by whatever, or he's sniffing whatever, and I say here and he doesn't come, I repeat here and give him a nick with the collar. It's a reminder and it's a reinforcement. That's what they're used for. And they're really an effective tool because with dogs, you've got to reinforce behavior immediately. And so if you've got let's just say I'm shipping out 4 puppies on Saturday all across the U.S., and these people are going to get their dogs. And they're going to start this process of the dreaded potty training in the house. And so the dog's going to go in, and inevitably they're going to lose track of the dog. The dog's going to be playing. Everything's going to be good. They're going to walk around the corner. There's going to be a puddle or some poop in the kitchen. And what we want to do is take the dog in there and tell the dog how bad it is. The dog has no clue what in the world's going on at that point. That dog is not remembering whatever it did 10 minutes ago in the kitchen. And so if you take that dog in and rub its nose in pee, the dog's thinking, man, whose pee is this and why am I in it? It's not anything that works like humans. And so when it comes to effectively training, you've got to offer a reward or correction immediately. So when you've got a dog that does something good, you don't need to wait until they come all the way back to you before you say good. You need to teach the dog what the word good means and then say it when they're in the field and they do something good. Same thing with correction. And what a collar does is it allows you to give immediate correction in the field. It's really just a fix. But back in the old days, guys used to just carry slingshots and marbles, and if the dog did something wrong and needed correction, they just pop the dog with the marble out. And I've heard old wives' tales of dog trainers that can hit a dog at like 50, 60 yards with the marble with a slingshot. And so it's really just, obviously more humane method. A lot of people think collars are inhumane, and huge debate on that, and they can be used in a humane way, but really so can your feet and your fist. A lot of people that I've heard horror stories of guys that are all anti-collar, but yet they'll beat the mess of the dog in the field. And so they don't have to be used that way. Honestly, when it comes to most dogs' threshold, a collar feels like licking a 9-volt battery. It's not like you're really shocking the dog. And they have to be conditioned properly. And then when used properly, they're a good tool. I did not use collars in my training program. It's not because I'm philosophically opposed to them. It's because I'm importing dogs from the UK, and in the UK, electronic collars are illegal, and so you can't train with them. And so the dogs I'm buying have been trained via training programs that don't use collars for, a century. And so the training methods are very different, a little bit more positive, but not always just positive, just different ways of teaching the dogs. And a lot of my clients are looking for that. A lot of my folks are looking for the dog that behaves like the dogs in the field in the UK, just they do it in our field and in our water. And so to sort of be true to that program, I don't use them. I have used them in the past. I've had a lot of success with them. I've seen some people use them and it be just a colossal failure if they didn't know what they were doing. But I have some great friends who are pro dog trainers who use them all the time, and they use them very well. And they use them on American dogs, and they use them on British dogs, and it works. And so not opposed to them at all, don't really use them. But if it came down to it, I really needed to, I definitely would.
Yeah, and that's something that, I honestly thought that it was a teaching method, not a reinforcement type scenario that you described. So I can see how that gets abused and misused inappropriately, and could be detrimental to a puppy if not used properly and and with caution. So I think that's a great thing for our listeners that may use shock collars or is considering doing it. Take care when you use that and you kind of get into that realm. But I wanted to change gears a little. Yeah, go ahead.
If I could add one last thing before we change gears, I think for the guys that are like training their own dog, and I really encourage that. I tell my clients all the time, like, look, get a program. I help. I'm a distributor of a British program. A friend of mine on Ireland. It's 6 hours of DVD footage. I'm training a dog all the way from 7 weeks up to fully trained. It's a British method, but it's helpful. Even if you get an American method, that's awesome. I encourage people to do that. If you're going to train with a collar, or if you're just going to train with any sort of reinforcement, whether it's jerking the lead, whatever it is, you need to ask yourself a question, and you need to be able to ask and answer the question very quickly in the field. And I think this is what distinguishes guys who actually make it as dog trainers and guys who don't. You need to be able to answer the question, why did the dog do that? Did the dog, I was talking to my friend Brady Davis today about something his dog did in the field last weekend, great hunting, and then just did something kind of bozo. We've all had that. I've had my best dogs, do something. You're just like, what in the world happened? You got to ask yourself, why did the dog do that? And if the answer is the dog's obviously disobeying because something else is more exciting to the dog than obeying right now, well, that's something that needs a correction. 9 times out of 10, it's just confusion. And you haven't gone and properly built the foundation for what that dog needs to be doing. And so when guys go out and buy collars or, just jerk up dogs or get on to dogs or whip dogs or whatever it is guys do, I see a lot of guys do that when the dog is not disobeying. I mean, dogs rarely set out to defy their trainer. Usually they really just want to make you happy. And so if it's anything other than disobedience, correction is not really what's needed. You need to go back a few steps and really build that foundation. Usually it's just confusion. The dog's not necessarily sure what you're asking of it, and you need to go back and build on that foundation. So I just wanted to clear that up before we move on. Yeah,
no, that's a great point. And I actually, I'm just sitting here thinking, again, I don't have a dog that retrieves or anything, but, my dog is a golden retriever that's high strung as can be, and he's really driven and can be really frustrating sometimes because he's super smart only when I have a treat in my hand, and the rest of the time he's just a complete idiot that does whatever he wants to do. So, I know how frustrating that makes me get, but if I'm a guy in the field and I'm embarrassed in front of my buddies and something is going wrong, I might be more apt to maybe get a little quick with the the shock to try to make the situation correct when I may be actually doing more harm than good. So I think what you mentioned in there is a really good point. But I did want to change gears a little bit here, and I referenced my dog, and he's at one time I thought about maybe having him be some sort of kind of bird dog, but that wasn't to be in the cards for him. But for the guy that has a dog that maybe is getting into waterfowl a little more seriously maybe than he had been originally, and that kind of thing, and wants to maybe try to get his dog involved in the field with him and teach his dog to retrieve. How late is too late? Can you teach the old dog new tricks type of deal? Is there a time when it's best to say you're kind of too late in the development of the dog to really have the dog be an effective retriever and really get the results you want? Or is it sort of never too late to kind of start the program and get some sort of results from your dog?
Yeah, I don't think it can ever just be too late just on time or age. I mean, obviously there are limits to that. If your dog's 10, that's probably not wise. We usually retire dogs when they're 10. But you've got a 4-year-old dog, it's been a great house dog, and you want to see if the dog is, able to compete in the field, or at least go out and pick up your ducks on the weekend. I say go for it. You can definitely do it. If you bought a dog that doesn't have any sort of, field-proven status as far as pedigree, and you don't know if the parents hunted, you're just going to have to check some stuff out. The biggest hindrance you have, you can teach an old dog whatever you want to teach an old dog. The problem is you begin to have to unteach a lot of things the dog has picked up. And so you've got all of these habits that dogs get. They're very habitual creatures, dogs. And so as they grow, really training is taking a concept, teaching a dog the concept and making it a habit. And so you mentioned, I'm sure the dog may go pick up bumpers in the yard, but you hit the dog in the marsh and it falls apart. Well, that's part of training. We take our dogs to, 10 different locations and run the same drills. And so you got a dog that's grown up inside the house. They've never experienced this stuff. They've got a lot of habits. You got to go figure out which one of those habits, which of those habits you need to undo. And then does the dog have natural ability? There's some things you just can't put into a dog. I've got a Springer Spaniel. I'm looking at it right now. She's my wife's dog. She's pretty. She's smart as a whip. She's a gun dog breed. She's not from gun dog stock. She would not retrieve a ribeye steak. She would want you to go get it for her. It's not in the books for her. It's not happening. There's no natural ability. There's nothing I can do to fix that. That's just how she is. And so out of the picture with her. But if you've got a dog that you've been, smacking the tennis ball around with in the backyard and the dog is really a go-getter, then yeah, absolutely. I say go for it. You're going to have to check out a few things, like gun shyness. I know we'd mentioned that, before the show. Gun shyness can be taught. It can also be, bred into a dog. And so you're going to need to do all the steps, even with an old dog, of properly introducing the dog to gunfire. Having someone fire a gun and throw a bumper from 100 yards away, like a 20 gauge, and then have them come in closer and closer and monitor the dog to make sure they respond well. Does the dog have a soft mouth? If the dog brings back a tennis ball and it's flat and punctured, that might not be a good thing when you shoot, you shoot a big honker and you come back and the dog, it's missing half of its breast because the dog chewed it up on the way back. Those things can be bred into a dog. And if that's the case, then obviously you're not going to be able to go very far. But at the same time, you can have a lot of success, taking a dog who's already 3, 4, 5, even 6 years old. And I can even testify to that. Some of the dogs that I've imported from the UK are, I've got a field trial champion here at my kennel, one of my stud dogs. And he did the British thing, driven shoots, walk-up shoots, mostly like partridge and pheasant. and that sort of thing, and some ducks, but usually just around a small pond, and they're usually, raised ducks that were released, that sort of thing. Not a lot of wild duck hunting. This dog had never seen a goose in his life, had never been on a field hunt in his life, had never been in a field blind in his life. I worked with him for a couple weeks. He was 4 years old at the time, and then went to Kansas, and on the very first day we killed 67 geese in the field, and he picked up 65 of those, and that's only because 2 of them landed like right in the layout blinds. Went back in the layout blind every time, was very steady in the layout blind, and this is all new. He'd never experienced any of that, and he's 4 years old, but we were able to, teach it to him. He picked it up really quickly, and he's fantastic. Hey, I've seen it happen. I know you can teach a dog new tricks for sure.
That makes me laugh when you're talking about your wife's dog, because my wife also has a dog, and whenever I'm out in the yard with Kimber and we're playing fetch or something, and the most that he does is he'll bite Kimber's legs. So trying to teach him new tricks, I don't know. He's going to be a house dog forever, I think. So
yeah, it's just worth it.
Yeah. But hey, that's her dog, and she cuddles with him, so that's fine.
Happy.
Yep. So let's set some expectations here. What would you consider realistic for a first or second year dog out in the field, or when is a good time to introduce them into the hunting scene? About what age would you say?
Man, that's a great question. You ask a lot of people that are buying puppies, and you think that they're ready to hunt those things at 6 months old. They're going to be ready to hunt this year. And I was like, it's going to be about 3 months, and that's going to be a no. People, it's America. We want stuff right now. We want it fast. We want it, delivered. We want it awesome, which is great. But dogs don't really work that way. I always tell people a rule of thumb. If you're going to hunt a dog before they're a year old, you need to really make sure you've crossed all your T's and dotted all your I's. You check everything. I have a dog. I have one of my females. I hunted her at 10 months. She picked up around 300 birds her first season and turned a year old after that season was over. And it worked out well. Most dogs, I wouldn't do that. And so when it comes to a checklist, is the dog very comfortable around guns? And I don't mean like the one gun that pops one time with a 22 primer when you're shooting one bumper. Because let's be honest, when you're with a group of guys and it's the first duck hunt of the season, and that, it's right, right at shooting light and 2 wood ducks buzz your hole, everyone's unloading. That's just how it works. And so is the dog comfortable enough so when that happens, they're not going to have an absolute conniption fit, and just ruin the dog? As we, went to earlier, has the dog been exposed to all the elements they're going to see on this hunt? The hunting is training the first season. I tell people all the time, you're going to find holes in your training program and holes in your dog your first season. And there's going to be a lot of training. But that doesn't mean that the goal is training. Like, you ought to go into the field with a lot of confidence that you've prepared your dog adequately. And then when they do fail, come back and say, okay, what do I need to do differently to fix this? It's not hey, I just want to get the dog some good experience and get them some birds. Because truthfully, you can get the dog a whole lot more bad experience by taking them into the field too early. In all honesty, dove season is the worst. People will, they got a young dog. They want the dog to experience something, so they're going to take them dove hunting because that's the first season. Everybody's getting excited about killing stuff. And hey, no one really takes dove hunting that seriously. So if the dog acts like a fool, who cares? But then you've got, just think about a dove hunt. You've got guns from all across a couple acres, shooting birds from all different angles. It's hot as all get out. I'm here in the South, and I'm in Mississippi, so it's like 100 degrees in September. So the dog's hot. You're shooting the smallest birds that we kill, and they're the same color as dirt, which they're often landing in. And then their little feathers fall out all in the dog's mouth. I've seen 2 dogs on their very first dove retrieve swallow the dove on accident. And so, people will take dogs out like, hey, I just want to kind of see what they're made of. I think training is a better situation to see what they're made of. And then once you're confident, hey, this dog can handle everything I'm going to throw at it in the duck blind, then take them. But general rule of thumb is the dog's less than a year old, I wouldn't take them out. I'd let them sit a year out. You know, you're talking about 10 years of hunting. And so build that foundation right and have a retriever that's worth it for 10 years, and don't cut it short just to hunt that first year and then wind up putting a lot of problems in the dog that you're going to have to deal with the next 10 years.
Yeah, and I can attest to that a little bit just because I think we picked Kimber up in, it must have been around July. So, you know, the upcoming duck season, goose season, you know, she's only a couple months old. So I'd bring, you know, a goose home and you know, mess around in the yard, and she couldn't even pick it up yet. So, I mean, it was definitely out of the question that year. And then the following year, she was still, you know, she just wasn't ready still. So, I mean, she was, you know, a year and a half, and it just, you know, her size, she's an American lab, so she's not, you know, big bone. She's not a big dog, but, you know, she wasn't ready to go out and do what, you know, what she needed to do. So, you know, it was the third season that we had her that she finally made it out and was able to do what I wanted her to do. So those are great points. And like you said, don't rush it, because, you know, they're going to pick up bad habits, and, you know, it's frustrating for not only the hunter, but I'm sure for the dog too, not to be able to do what you want them to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not, you know, with all of this, it's a huge investment. I mean, this thing is going to live with you for like possibly 14 years, and it's going to hunt with you 10 seasons. So, you know, the people who are wanting to save a couple months of training or hunt it, you know, really early in life, or even save $100 on a puppy, you just want to say, look, this is a big investment. You know, this is not you're not buying a layout blind. You know, this is a big deal. And so those things are important. You know, take your time, make wise decisions.
So Barton, there's two things I want to ask you, and I think there may be, in my opinion, two of the most important things for a guy that owns a dog, you know, and I'm going to use it as a loose term, a finished dog. And what I mean by that is not, you know, we're out of that first couple seasons of training. I mean, this is a 4, 5, 6-year-old dog, has spent some time in the field, you know, confident in, you know, its abilities, all that kind of stuff. What are some things that guys can do to ensure that their dog is ready when the season opens? And then on top of that, talk to us a little bit about some of the things that a guy can do to maintain the skill sets throughout the season, you know, prevent forming bad habits, and just sort of, you know, not letting all the hard work and the time and the investment and the stuff that you've put in up front, not letting that deteriorate to the point where, you know, the dog's regressing and you're losing some of that functionality that you had, you know, when you first finished the program. So talk to us a little bit about those two areas.
Yeah, that's a great question. I get at least one call every year for the dog that we trained. The dog left here, you know, we actually get video of dogs before they leave here for this very reason. The dog left here just tip-top shape, and then went on the first duck hunt, and it was just a colossal failure. And I'm like, well, you know, what have you done, you know, since you took the dog home 6 months ago? And, you know, come to find out, the dog's just been, you know, sitting at the feet of goes. And the guy's wondering why the dog's not like it was when it got, you know, first home from the trainer. And a lot of things you can do. I mean, you obviously need to get your dog in shape. Your dog needs to be in good shape. And however you want to do this, if you've got an ATV and some land, you just want to go run the dog if you trust your dog not to run off. If you need to run a bunch of retrieves, run a bunch of retrieves. If the dog is severely overweight, then you really need to do it in the water, because the dog running a lot when it's overweight can cause a lot of joint and hip issues. And so if we have a dog come in for training and the dog's overweight, we just tell the client, look, the first month we're just going to do a whole bunch of swimming and retrieving in the water. We're probably going to get this weight off. And so make sure the dog's in tip-top shape. Just go through, you know, each year, we have some clients who send their dogs back to us in the fall as just, you know, hey, I just need a refresher course with my dog. My dog needs a month with you just to get in shape, and then kind of experience the whole deal again. And so we do marks. We freeze plenty of ducks every year so that in the fall we can bring out those ducks and make sure dogs are good with picking up birds again. We shoot guns around them. And of course, you've got the finished dog. When you've got a dog that has had, you know, 4 or 5 duck seasons under its belt, it's really, you know, the dog that when you show up at the duck blind, they know what's going on. They're ready to roll. There's not a ton you have to do other than just maintenance. Take the dog out 2-3 days a week, and our dogs that are fully trained, that are on maintenance mode, they get trained 3 days a week. And what that typically looks like is one day we'll come out and we'll have like 5 pretty nice distance cold blinds set up, and we'll just run them through cold blinds, meaning we put the birds out before the dogs ever get out of the trailer or out of the kennels. They have no clue where they are, and we just run them on blinds. And then the next day we'll run 2 big marks and a blind. Just get the dog out, give the dog something that's a little bit challenging just to keep the dog's mind going. But we're not teaching it anything new. The dog knows how to handle all of it. Of course, the dog's going to keep learning its whole life through experience. And so you don't want them to sit. They're not robots. It's like you find someone, I'm 27. I have a degree in religious studies. If someone wanted to talk to me about calculus right now, man, I wouldn't even know where to begin. I took it, I got a B or an A or whatever in it. Obviously, I knew it at one point, but I haven't thought about it in a long time. And that's really how dogs work. You get a dog out and they're trained, but you don't keep reinforcing it. You can really lose it. Now, you can get it back much quicker than it took the first time with reminding the dog. And so that's really what you want to start doing in the fall. Remind the dog of its training, go through work obedience, make sure the dogs, sit, stay, all those things are reinforced. Just sort of, most of it's honestly common sense. What do you expect the dog to do on opening morning? All right, let's walk through all that and make sure it's doing it right now.
I just want to say, I think it's a great tip that you said if a dog is overweight, you start with water training. And it's just like a human. If you're really overweight, the last thing you want to do is, try and run a marathon. Like, you're just going to hurt yourself. And I think that applies to a dog as well. So I think that's a great tip for someone that, like you said, is feeding their dog Doritos during the off season. You don't want to just get them out sprinting. They're going to end up with an injury. So, you're talking about dove hunting, and anyone that's had a dog dove hunting, they come back and, they're licking their chops just because it's full of feathers. And talk a little bit about what should a handler take in the field for their dog during a hunt, as far as food and water, first aid? Like, obviously on a dove hunt, I always have water just because, the dog, usually it's hot, like you said, and they're hurting for a drink because, a mouthful of dove is just doesn't look fun to me.
Yeah, no good. Yeah, in dove season, and honestly, we have, here in the South, we have early teal. We actually have early goose in September. And that's the worst one. I don't know a lot of people here in Mississippi that chase them, but I do. And we get after some early geese. And last year on a hunt, I think we killed around 27 honkers, and we had 2 dogs, and it was about right at 90 degrees. And you're talking about 15, 17-pound birds hauling them in. Water is extremely important at that point, but it's not like humans though. I mean, we think about dogs. Like humans all the time, and you think, I'll just get it some water, it'll be fine. It's actually not the case. If you let the dog drink too much water when they're overheated like that, they can bloat really easily. So you just want to give the dog like a cup, maybe 2 cups of water at the most at a time. And dogs cool off through evaporation of water. That's why their tongues get really big. And that's why if you get them in the water, they can cool off, but not hot water, and they can't just get in the water and then jump in the kennel. And so if you got a dog in like a dog blind or in a crate when it's really hot, even if the dog's wet, they're not going to cool off in a crate because there's no air passing over them. And so if you got a dog that's really hot, there's any way you can have a fan. Even if you got a dog trailer, like in dove season, we have a dog trailer with a fan. I'll take 4 or 5 dogs. I'll have 2 in the field with me at any time. The rest of them are in the trailer, and they're soaking wet, and the fan's running to cool them off. Now, when it comes to waterfowling, what we're approaching now, for all the folks listening all over the U.S., they're calling for a colder winter than last year, which for me down in Mississippi is hard to even imagine. And I know it's not nearly as cold down here as some places. You really got to make provisions for your dog. And so there are a lot of things you can do. You can buy vests. There's some companies making some really nice vests. We use the Drake vest, and they work really well. The neoprene works well. It's got to fit right. It's got to be tight on the dog. We don't run it unless our dogs don't wear vests unless there's ice in the water. And so when there's ice in the water, the dog has a chance of cutting itself, climbing out of the ice. The vest can protect from that. If we're hunting timber and there's cypress stumps, we wear vests because the dog can jump off the stand, hit its chest on the cypress vest, and the vest adds a little bit of protection for that. And then when it's just really cold, helping keep that core temp up as far as keeping it doesn't actually keep the dog from getting wet, but it keeps the water pushed tightly against the dog's skin. The dog actually heats the water up and it almost becomes like an incubator for itself. And so the vests are a good move. Water is still important. Some people overlook water, even when it's hot, but the dog still doesn't need to be dehydrated, especially on a field hunt in the Midwest when you're out there all day and it's dry and windy. Dogs going to need water. I was in a conversation on Facebook the other day. Brady Davis posted pictures of the Purina has a product out. It's almost like those power bars that you see, pros at the gym, taking all the time with them or whatever those things are. I don't take any of those things, but it's for dogs. And it's like a nutrition bar for the field. And so they have like a replenish one and then like one that's supposed to provide energy during the hunt. And from all I've read, those can be very helpful because your dogs can be burning carbs, especially if you're just smashing birds. And so it keeps your dog's, sugar levels up. We keep a first aid kit with us, and it's got the normal stuff that, it's got gauze, it's got hydrogen peroxide, which can be used to clean cuts. It can also be used to force a dog to throw up if the dog swallows something that doesn't need to swallow. And then it's got, all the things that you would need for like wound care, but on top of that, it's got, Benadryl for a snake bite, or anything that would cause an allergic reaction. That, you can at least give the dog Benadryl, get the dog to a vet quickly. And then it's also got, we usually have Caro syrup with us, which is sugar. And if you see your dog start to really go downhill from a lack of sugar, the dog gets kind of wobbly. The dog just gets really lethargic. The dog's gums start to turn white. What we do is take a big old handful of Caro syrup and we rub it all over their gums. We rub it all over their paws, and their body begins to absorb that sugar really quickly, and it can really, bring a dog back. Even if the dog begins to get a little bit too cold, you need to get that blood sugar back up and get the dog warm. So there's a lot of things you can do. Big thing for us is last year I think I hunted iced up water with actual ice eaters in the water 5 or 6 times. And there were just some times where I had to sit back. I actually had a friend tell me this because I was, I own Kennel. I've got the big shot stud dogs, and we're here with, 12, 13 guys shooting ducks. So, I'm like, of course I'm going to send my dog. And I had a friend of mine just kind of say, hey, man, do you really want to send your dog on that retrieve? And I just kind of sat back and said, I really don't. If I were the dog, I don't want to swim, 150 yards through icy water that's, half a centimeter thick, so the dog can't ever climb on top of it. It's constantly breaking it with its chest for, that far. It's really unfair to a dog. And so I just tell people, be reasonable. It's not worth losing your dog to get that cool retrieve at the end, whatever it is. Think through it. Make sure that you're thinking, hey, is the dog in good shape? Keep up with your dog. Watch for the warning signs of, being lethargic, being wobbly, cold tail. Sometimes dogs get cold tail where their tail gets kind of stiff, and that can be pretty bad. So a lot of warning signs, just keep up with them.
You mentioned this winter is supposed to be, they're projecting a brutally cold winter in most of the country, and colder than last year. So I think it's really important to just, people just kind of take a step back and realize, sometimes it's, there is such a thing as too cold, or, there is such a thing in dove season as too hot. And you just got to be careful because, they're not just your hunting, tool and resource. I mean, that's your buddy, and that's, part of your family. So just, keep that in mind when you, like you said, when you send them on that retrieve, is it really something that, you feel comfortable with doing? And if you even have a doubt, pull them back, grab the boat and go grab them up that way or something, that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially icy water. If I know I can't get to the dog in a matter of seconds on icy water, we're just not going to do it. It's just not worth it. The sad thing is they're not like people, in all honesty. If it's, icy water and someone looks at me and tells me to walk out and wade out and get the bird, I'm going to be like, hey, man, you're crazy. I'm not going to get that bird. Dogs don't function like that. You know, they're never going to say it's too cold. Not a good dog anyway. They're never going to say it's too hot. And so it's really up to you. You've got to be the one to make that call and be responsible in that kind of way.
Do you have something you want to say, Dan?
Well, there's so many questions that popped up during that. One that I do want to touch on, when you were talking about when it's really hot, like dove hunting, and you give your dog, say, a cup or 2 cups of water, and it's really, really hot. What is the temperature of the water? Say you have a cooler there with ice cold water. Is that what you want to give to the dog, or do you want to give something, the temperature outside?
That's a huge debate in the gun dog world, or in just the working dog world in general. I don't ever give my dogs ice, just the whole, I don't know if it's true. I'm not a doctor, but even with people, hey, if you really want to cool off, you need to drink just lukewarm water, because your body actually has to work harder to convert ice water to its temperature, and that extra amount of work and calorie burning will bring up your core temp. I've always heard that. I know a lot of people say that you can actually kill a dog by giving it ice water when it's really hot. I don't think that's true. I've read a lot of articles on that. But for me, what I do is anytime I'm dove hunting or hunting when it's that hot, I've got a cooler, and I always grab a couple of water bottles just for the dogs. And so they're never really getting ice. I don't want them to choke. I just don't want to even fool with that. So I just keep a water bottle in the ice, and then whenever we get to where we're going and we're all set up, I'll pour a water bottle into a bowl, and I just leave that out. And if it gets low, I'll just put another one in that. Unless the dog is just really trying to drink too much, and then I'll pull it away. And so I don't ever give them hot water. I don't ever give them ice, but I give them everything in between.
Yeah, and I had the same, just reading, if you give them ice water, it can turn their stomach, and you'll end up at the vet and possibly a dead dog. And I just, I wanted to get your point of view on that. So,
never seen it happen. I mean, I've seen it happen with food. I've seen bloat happen with food, and that can be a big deal if you have a dog that eats really fast, or if you're running a dog. Like, let's just say you go get one of those power bars I mentioned. I would never give my dog the whole thing if it just retrieved a couple birds. And so if the dog's breathing really heavily, it's panting, its chest is moving back and forth, you notice the dog's actually, it's been exerting itself. You don't want to give a dog a lot of food in that situation. We never feed our dogs unless they've been resting for at least 30 minutes, because their stomach can actually flip with food. What'll happen is through contractions in the stomach, it'll twist, and if you're in most cases, if you don't get to the vet immediately and have a pretty invasive surgery or surgical procedure done, you're going to lose the dog. And so that's another thing to think of. If the dog's exercising, you don't want to just pour a big old bowl of food out in the field. You can use peanut butter crackers, all that, those sort of things to give the dog some sugar and keep it going as far as fuel. But you don't want to just give it a bunch of food or a bunch of water.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you've touched on diet a couple different times, and, the protein bars and that kind of thing. Are you adjusting diets, for the different types of year, or different times of the year, or the temperatures, or, if it's going to be you're approaching the fall when the dog's going to be working harder and that kind of stuff? Are you changing food types, or, juggling nutrition at all? Or are you kind of staying consistent with, with the diet?
I stay fairly consistent. I actually do make a couple changes. I feed Victor dog food. There are a lot of really good dog food brands out there. I really love Victor. I found them about a year ago, and it's been the best thing for our kennel. And it's got high protein. It's not just extremely high, and it's got high fat content. And then they offer several different levels. And I feed a formula year round to all my dogs except for pregnant females, nursing females. They get a little bit higher up formula, or the only one that is higher up, and it's got a little bit more fat, a chunk more protein, and it just helps them to recoup and to recover more quickly. And then in the season, I have dogs that hunt. All my dogs hunt in the season. Some of them hunt with buddies of mine. Some of them hunt just a couple days with me. But I do have two dogs that they pretty much hunt with me all the time, no matter what. And for those dogs that are in the blind, I typically try to hunt at least 40 days a year, sometimes more. Those dogs I'll put them on the higher protein formula. It's less about changing their food though, because we try to feed a quality food, obviously all year round. It's more about the amount. In the summertime, dogs don't have quite as much of an appetite, but they are still running, so you want to keep their weight on. But in the wintertime, when it's cold, you want to add, maybe a pound or two, not too much, but they're going to burn a lot more fuel. And so you've got to match that. And so if you just feed them the same amount day in, day out, and then all of a sudden their routine changes and they begin to exercise a bit more, and you don't account for that, you're going to wind up with some pretty scrawny dogs. And so you just got to really adjust the amount more than the nutrition. If you're already, if you're already doing it right with the nutrition. Of course, there's a lot of things, our dogs that are working really hard and begin to look a little bit lean, we'll throw a couple raw eggs in, maybe 3 a week, during their regular feedings, and that sort of thing. And then the dogs, when we take big trips, to go hunt out in whether it's Kansas or Minnesota, wherever we go, and we know we're going to be really pounding it for 4, 5, 6 days, we'll just about double the amount of food the dog eats just to keep them going for that hunt, because you don't want it just to, wear them down, and you don't want them to be just, all haggard and ragged after the hunts.
So, Barton, we've kept you a long time, and we really, really appreciate the time and the knowledge and the insight that you provided us here. But before we let you go, I want to ask you one more question here. So you spend a lot of time around dogs, not only in the training environment, but in the field. And I'd like for you to share with us maybe, one or two kind of things that you observe. That's just some of the coolest things that you've seen, dogs in the field do. And I'm sure you've got some stories of some dogs that you've trained, and just sort of the, the pride and the reward and the, the gratification that you feel that goes along with that. So if you wouldn't mind, share a quick story or two with us about something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it obviously dozens to choose from, and obviously they can become big fish stories pretty quickly. I hear a lot of guys talk about, they tell one guy about the retrieve that was 200 yards, and the next time it was 500 yards, and then it was, 3 miles away.
Uphill both ways.
Honestly, yeah, there you go. Honestly, I've seen some really cool dog work, my own dog work, but I've also seen, clients who took dogs that we bred and trained them, and man, did some really, really neat stuff. I'd say the coolest one for me, the second to last day of last year's season here in Mississippi, I was just really busy, really slammed. My mother and father-in-law were here from Africa, so they were here visiting, so I definitely wasn't going to travel. And a good friend of mine who actually has one of my puppies lives just up the road and has this huge watershed on his property. And it was loaded with geese, but it was just impossible to pattern these geese. They'd come in at 4 p.m. one day. You go out the next day, they're coming in 30 minutes after sunset. It's just impossible to figure them out. And so we sat out, and it was actually really embarrassing. We called a big volley of geese in. It was late January, and we realized we got out there. We only had number 2 shot, and we called them right in the decoy, sat up, unloaded 6 shells, and didn't drop a goose. And we were just looking at each other like, this is absolutely ridiculous, and we have to redeem something here. This is the worst shooting we've done all year, and it's the second to last day of the season. So this pair comes over, and we shoot, and we drop one, and then we shot several times, and we're watching the second one, kind of looking at it like maybe it's going to fall, maybe not. Flies over the watershed, over some woods. It was all pine trees, and gets to the edge of those woods on the other side and just falls, just stone cold dead. You could just see it just fall out of the sky. And he just kind of looked at me like, "Are you going to do that?" And I had one of my stud dogs. His name's Archie. He's really excellent dog. A lot of fun to hunt with. He didn't see the dog. He's looking at the one that's dead in the decoys. So I went ahead and picked the one up in the decoys, lined him up, and just sent him. And it was a little bit below freezing. There's a little bit of ice starting to kind of skim on top of the water, but not a lot. And I think it was about in all honesty, the swim was only about 150, 170 yards. But when he got to the edge, it was a really steep bank. and he climbed up on it, and it's almost dark. I'm blowing the whistle. He stops. I give him a back cast, and he's kind of running up and down the bank, a little bit confused. It's just really steep. And so he gets right where I want him, and I blow the whistle, and I just give him a big left back as loud as I can, and just trying to be stern, like, hey, you're gonna have to go way back on this one, buddy. And he disappeared into the pine and was just gone. And so we're just kind of standing there. I was like, man, there's no telling. It felt like 20 minutes. In all honesty, it was probably about 2.5 to 3 minutes. And all of a sudden, here's this big old chunk of white coming out of the woods, and all you can see is this goose. And he comes back. So, of course, I got this really cool app on my phone called GeoMeasure. So I pull out GeoMeasure. I drop a pin where we are. I drop a pin to the closest point we could find where the edge of those woods were, where this thing had to land. It was right at 370 yards. And I was just like, man, that's the coolest thing ever. I didn't direct the dog the whole way. I gave him one cast, and he took it and found the goose on his own through a middle of, big, thick pine wood, wooded area. And that was a pretty prideful moment. That was definitely one. I actually wrote the whole story down, just like, man, I don't ever want to forget that. That was pretty cool to see. And it definitely made up for my miserable shooting that had just happened prior to that. I actually told that guy we would never tell anybody about that bad shooting. So Jason, I'm sorry. There it is, man. Maybe his barrel was a little bit bent. I don't know.
I was going to say, you didn't have to out his name, but it's out there now.
Now he's out there.
Well, that's awesome. It's cool to see. It's cool to hear the stories. Obviously you've shared a lot of information with us. You're clearly knowledgeable. You're passionate about what you do. Speaking for me personally, if I'm looking to get a duck dog, I want a guy that hunts duck too, just as much as I do. And, you pro staff with Dakota Decoys. So, you're involved in the waterfowl industry. You're involved in the breeding of the gun dogs. So, as far as I'm concerned and, the type of breeder that I'm looking for, you certainly would fit all of those categories. So, tell us, for folks listening to this show, if they want to check you out at Southern Oak Kennels, how can they find you, online, that kind of thing?
Yeah, we're on the web at www.southernoakkennels.com. We're on Facebook. We got a Facebook page, Southern Oak Kennels. You can check us out. My name is Barton Ramsey. Would love to be your friend on Facebook as well to chat there. We have an Instagram that's just Southern Oak Kennels, and we have a Twitter account that's Southern Oak Kennels. And so we're, all the ways you can find us on social media, we're on there. Website stays very up to date as far as puppies. We have puppies on the ground right now. Typically, we're not like a huge breeder. We don't breed just tons of dogs. We have anywhere from 3 to 6 litters each year, and so it sort of varies. But we do put people on lists for certain puppies, and then we welcome guys out. I got some fellow Dakota Decoy staff guys that are coming in about a week just to come hang out. Never met them before, but they want to see the kennel, so we're going to go out. We're going to work dogs. And have a good time. And so anyone that wants to have fun working dogs, if you want to bring your dog out and just train with our dogs for a day, we welcome all that. We're here in Northeast Mississippi, and we'd love to meet new folks, meet new dogs, and talk dogs. Man, we talk dogs all day long. Obviously, we enjoy it. So
awesome.
That's how you can find us, and we've got a contact page on there as well. So feel free to get in touch.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you coming on the show and talking dogs with us here, for a little while. And we encourage everybody to check you out at, southernoakkennels.com and all your social media platforms that you're on there. So, and for anyone listening, if you've got questions or concerns for Barton, feel free to reach out to him online. And, obviously he knows what he's talking about and can get you squared away on anything you might have. So, again, Barton, we appreciate you coming on the show. I know I've taken away a bunch. I'm sure Dan, probably has taken away even more, being that he owns a dog. So, we're really grateful for having you on, and let's try to do it again sometime.
Absolutely. I enjoyed it. Thank you guys for having me. Thanks for producing. One of the best waterfowl podcasts out there. As of yet, I look forward to seeing how you guys continue to grow in that, and look forward to hearing podcasts in the future. Thank you guys very much for having me.
Well, we definitely appreciate that. And again, everybody can check you out at southernoakkennels.com. All right, Barton, take care. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Well, there you have it, Dan. I think pretty clear that Barton knows what he's talking about when it comes to gun dogging, and I think there was a lot to pull out of that interview, and would encourage everybody to check out Barton at Southern Oak Kennels. www.southernoakkennels.com. You can find him on Facebook, all that good stuff. Just a wealth of knowledge and a really good resource for anybody that's into gun dogging and dog training in general.
Yeah, he had a ton of good tips there, and I wish I would have talked to him before I went to pick my dog. Even I wouldn't change my dog for anything in the world, but going into the next one, when that time unfortunately will come at some point, I'll have a better head on my shoulders after that conversation there. So, that was a great guest to have on, and hopefully we can talk to him more in depth sometime.
Yep, without a doubt. So let's go ahead and wrap up the show with our parting shot. So this week, the parting shot is really just basically a big thank you from Dan and I to everyone that listens to this show. We started this show basically as to fill a hole in the podcast market that we saw, and just to continue the opportunity to talk about something that we love to do in waterfowl hunting. And the response that we've received has just been incredibly just overwhelming. The positive feedback that we received is incredible. All the phone calls and the emails and things that we've received from the listeners is just really appreciated. And we're really glad that everyone is enjoying the show, and we encourage everyone to keep engaged with us, and we'll continue to provide you the segments that you want to hear and the topics that you want to cover. If you haven't had the chance, you can check us out on iTunes. All of our information is on there. All the old episodes are in one spot. You can download them to your tablet or your iPad, iPhone, and take them with you on the go. And then there's also a lot of other great podcasts on there for you to check out. So iTunes is a great resource. If you hadn't had a chance to get on there and check us out, certainly do so. And again, just thank you for all of the support. And we look forward to continuing the show and having a lot of good success with this podcast. So that's going to wrap up episode 8 of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast. We'd like to thank Barton Ramsey from Southern Oak Kennels for joining us, and we hope you guys enjoyed our conversation regarding hunting buddies and just what makes a good one and what makes a bad one. If you'd like to reach out to us, please feel free to do so on our HP Outdoors hotline, 724-609-FOWL, 724-609-3695. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, online at hpoutdoors.com, and also on Facebook. So until next time, for Dan, I'm Josh. Take care.